Welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business Social Podcast, powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we talk to the experts and get the advice and just break down the knowledge on the ever-changing digital, social, and marketing landscape. This show is no different. Producer Will, episode number 73. You know, I was looking at our iTunes, and we actually already have 90 episodes on the podcast when you factor in all the panels and the non-numbered episode versions, maybe some of the mini pods. So we're coming up on 100, man. We're gonna have to do something, cool.
Yeah, unofficially still 28 away, or I guess unofficially getting close to 100, definitely.
So we're at 72, is that what you said?
72.
All right, man, give me, break it down. What do we, we're waiting until 80 to go back to sports numbers?
I'm going to say mid-70s for now, tentatively.
I know Dennis Rodman wore 73 on the Lakers. That's easy.
That's true. I think this list may stop and end at 1, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Samuel L. Jackson.
Welcome on inside the Samuel L. Jackson pod. We are joined this podcast by Ryan Prager. He is the head of social media at Team Liquid. Anybody that knows anything about esports knows Team Liquid got their start early. And I don't know, Will, we were looking at it. I mean, of course, millions of followers across all their social platforms, but their members or athletes, whatever you want to call them, when you add up all their followers across Twitch, 18.3 million followers, over 138 members that are under that Team Liquid umbrella, and 15 titles that they oversee. So, I mean, I know you've been a big fan of the esports world for quite some time, and Team Liquid is, what would you call them, the Yankees, the Lakers of esports?
Yeah, they're definitely in that tier. And I think Ryan obviously knows a ton more than I do. I'm just at a base level knowledge, but I think he can do such a good job of kind of breaking down how to get in and what some of those barriers to entry are and some successful partnerships that he's seen.
Yeah, because, we get on so many calls, Will, here at STN, and the number one thing I hear is like, we want to get younger, we want to attract Gen Z, and then I hear a lot of research like, well, Gen Z, like, they like esports, so maybe, and it's obviously not that simple, and it's obviously, quite a broad brush you're stroking there if you just say, everybody 18 to 24 loves gaming or loves esports. But so I want to just like kind of, in so many ways get his thoughts on that, because I know the audience and the community, they're able to, like any community, they're able to sniff out the pretenders versus the contenders when it comes to brands trying to latch onto that audience. So I'm excited to get his thoughts and much, much more. Ryan Prager, he's the head of social media over at Team Liquid. All right, he is the head of social media over at Team Liquid. Ryan Prager joins us on the Business Social Podcast. Ryan, thanks so much for the time, man. We appreciate it.
Hey, yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me on.
Well, great. So for our listeners, I'd love for you to break down just what you do at Team Liquid, because I know overseeing a lot of titles, a lot of games, a lot of people. So break it down for us.
Yeah, totally. So I'm the head of social media at Team Liquid, which is one of the world's biggest esports teams. My job is a lot of networking and thinking about kind of internal projects and making sure that we're getting the right content onto the right channels. For us, a big priority is making sure that when we're doing a piece or a post, we're getting it onto the right platform and not trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like in terms of Team Liquid, at least on Twitch anyway, there's like 138 total members under that umbrella, and combined like 18.3 million followers across all that. Like, are those numbers right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of us. So esports as an umbrella term covers kind of all of competitive gaming. Mm-hmm. So I guess unlike the NFL or the NHL, where each brand only has one team in each game, we represent teams in over 15 different titles, wow. Right? So we've got StarCraft players, we've got Counter-Strike players, League of Legends, Dota, kind of all the way down. And they all stream, post, and engage under the Team Liquid banner. So now, there's a lot of us, but
and I know exciting. Like from afar, and I'll probably sound like a rookie here, so don't get mad at me. But from afar, I mean, Team Liquid has always been known as like the premier franchise, if you will, when it comes to esports. So I guess walk me through like how that came to be and how you guys really asserted your dominance, like as a brand, because there's so many, right? There's so many not leagues, but so much teams that are popping up, and I feel like Team Liquid was able to assert their dominance early and kind of be best in class.
Yeah, well, definitely. We were one of the first, especially, kind of going back in the esports time machine.
Mhm.
Our founder, Victor, who goes by Liquid Nazgul, for the Lord of the Rings call out, he was actually one of the first Western kind of competitors to go
Mm.
over to Korea and compete with the big dogs in their kind of developing esports scene back in Brood War. So we got in early. We founded, or Victor founded, Team Liquid as a community site, and we were really kind of like a hub. We were a pre-Reddit community in terms of
Yep.
really centralizing a lot of the English-speaking StarCraft players, and then we signed our own players. We kind of built the team up from that way, and some of that was before my time, but
You
yeah,
can
we.
take credit for all of it. Just take credit for the whole
All
thing.
right, well, don't tell Victor, but it was all
Yes,
my idea.
I love it. From a social media standpoint, well, actually, let me start here. So, a lot of the listeners on this show, a lot of our previous guests, CMOs at major Fortune 500 brands, TV networks, sports teams, etc. And I'll tell you, Ryan, I'm on calls every day where people want to tap more into Gen Z. They want to tap more into esports. But there's also a way to do that. And I think there's also a disingenuous way to do that. So, I guess right off the bat, giving advice and putting your consultant hat on to brands that want to enter your space. What are the do's and don'ts? What have you seen work? Like anything you can share would be awesome.
Totally. Well, speaking of Gen Z, it's a lot of what we've got in esports. So
Mm-hmm.
we're a good spot for that, definitely. But to be honest, it can be a little bit scary coming in, right? I know the culture is really always on, always live, kind of always talking back and forth. And
Yep.
so kind of the biggest thing that we advise with brands is like kind of take it slow, be authentic, kind of get to understand the space, know what it is you're getting into, and kind of pick a favorite game, pick a favorite player, and do
Yeah.
it in a way that is kind of true to the company's brand and values, but also just like kind of what you're interested in. A lot of the people we speak to also, and I'm sure you as well, are just folks who really like gaming, and they're like, listen, I'm trying to pitch to my gigantic company that esports is where it's at. Like, how can we
Yeah.
get going? So normally we get some good luck in terms of people who really do understand the space, and they're just looking to incorporate the bigger brand in a easy way.
Well, I know for you guys too, like for example, you guys have Jersey Mike as a sponsor. And I know early on it started very, I guess, when the brands anyway, it started with like, keyboards and mouses and like gaming chairs. And it really started like in a niche
Mhm.
market. But now it's really moved into like those Fortune 500 brands. So when did you guys see that switch where all of a sudden the Jersey Mikes of the world are giving you a call opposed to just the niche brands?
Um, I think the actual answer is somewhere between 2017,
Yeah.
2018, when League of Legends kind of blew up and really started to take the esports world by storm, at
Hmm.
least. Fortnite kind of picked up around that same area.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of folks just kind of realized like, hey, this is more than just gamers buying gamer stuff, right? Like more and more people are getting into gaming, and kind of it's becoming its own little or own big market segment,
Yep.
and wanting to reach out through us that way.
Those Fortune 500 brands that may not have, like I said, a direct connection to the game or to the equipment. What have you seen work in your experience in terms of those, whether presenting sponsorship or branding content? 'Cause I know with your audience in particular, and really any audience, we've worked in boxing and MMA, and if you don't really know the sport in and out, you can really put yourself out in a vulnerable situation if you're a brand or if you're a personality. So, in your guys' experience, when it comes to those traditional brands, what has worked really well? Any examples of campaigns that you think just hit the audience the right way?
Yeah. Well, I will point to Jersey Mike's
Mhm.
again. I think we've been having a lot of success with them, and kind of one of the cheat codes is that with esports we are actually more than just gaming. We are sports as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of a lot of those more traditional hookups that we can
Hmm.
play to. Jersey Mike's has a subs for dubs campaign where every time
Nice.
Team Liquid wins, we'll give a coupon code out for everybody to get their next Jersey Mike sub.
Nice.
So that's a fun one. Whenever some of our games are getting close, the Twitch chat and our mentions will just fill up with subs for dubs, and waiting for that coupon to drop. So
yeah, right. I mean, as a Laker fan growing up in Southern California, it was all about if the Lakers held a team under 100, free Jack in the Box tacos for everybody. So towards the end of the game, it's "We want tacos" chants. So like you said, there's a lot of similarities. I think some people think it's such a brand new market that is confusing them to enter into, but there's a lot of those same things that work really well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're not exactly reinventing the wheel on much of this, but it works for a reason, and it still works in gaming and digital. So we get to pick up on some of those best practices as well.
Not cliche, but one thing I hear a lot of people say is like, we hear that Gen Zers like gaming, so let's do that. And you're kind of this broad brush across the entire demo. But I heard that a lot right now with brands. And you spoke earlier about doing it the right way. So is what you said earlier, the best way is to pick a game, maybe pick, a particular player and start small there so you kind of can figure out how you can tap into Gen Z in an authentic way?
Yeah. And I mean, like, gaming is a very big brush, right? So even for brands that are coming in, like we can find either athletes or creators that approach gaming with like their specific angle or something that kind of aligns with them, right? Like even with Team Liquid being so big, we've got a couple underdog stories on our roster. We have some teams who are at the peak of competition, right? So like some brands are just like, we are the S tier top competition, but others may be looking for more of a journey, right? So it's kind of narrowing down that broad brush of gaming and figuring out exactly like who do you want to work with, and directing a bit more from there.
Let's talk social media a little bit. So outside of Twitch, obviously kind of that hub platform, I know you guys have like 1 million followers on Instagram, almost 1 million on Twitter, but what seems to be like that second best platform for your guys' community anyway, when it comes to Team Liquid off of Twitch?
Well, so Twitch is a big one. Obviously, that's where all of our players stream. Second biggest is kind of an interesting question, right? Like obviously Instagram is the easy answer because it's our biggest. If we're just looking for posting the most beautiful photo and getting the broadest reach, that's where we're going. But I think for with most sports teams, Twitter carries a lot of that for us, where it's like that's where the game is being talked about, right? That's where the banter is. That's where the celebrations and the defeats are living. So maybe not in size exactly, but Twitter is pretty high up there.
And then logistically in the real tournaments, I'm guessing a lot of the chat is happening on Twitch, right? So do you see crossover in real time on Twitter as well, or do they mostly stay on platform?
It's definitely kind of all over, right? Okay. Like Twitch chat is moving like 1 million miles a minute, right? When the finals and there's over 100,000 of people tuning in, right? Like that's very much like listening to the cheers, but not really being able to parse out much. We'll be like exactly. Twitter is a little bit more constructive. Another thing we do is just like Discord and watch parties. Sometimes we'll just host an open call where like members of our staff will jump in and just kind of like have a virtual living room watch party kind of deal as well.
What percentage, if you know off the top of your head, of your audience, of your social media followers are in that Gen Z, under 24 demo? I know it varies per platform, but
it's a little bit all over the place, but I can tell you we definitely have 2 big spikes in the 18 to 24, 24 to 35, and then not much outside of those areas.
Not a lot of 67-year-old Team Liquid fans, huh?
No, there might be a couple, but
so from what I mentioned that is because you guys know really how to attract Gen Z audience. You know how to speak to them. You know how to create communities. So is there anything, again, kind of putting your consulting hat on outside of esports that you've just seen work really, really well in terms of the content, campaigns, how to build that community? Because I think it's just an interesting topic that every brand's trying to get younger. They're trying to diversify their audience. and are trying to just get tips and tricks of what seems to be working with that demo?
Hmm. Um, that's a tough one. I know the conversations we always have is like it was easy when everybody watched TV. And
Yeah, exactly.
now they're all over the place. I don't know. I think big picture, just following the content, following the creators. It's a lot of extra work, to be honest, but like finding the person who aligns with you. I know influencer marketing is kind of a touchy subject,
Right.
but because there's a lot that can go wrong with that. But I do think some of the most perfect kind of crossovers are the ones where they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Or the guy who's been wearing a Nike hat on stream for the past 3 years and then just gets the crossover because you're like, oh right, he really does like Nike, and it makes sense. So
yeah, and then from a social media standpoint, you guys have such a huge ecosystem with all your members or all your players have their own individual social media too. So how do you guys, I guess, help your athletes in that way for just adding more into your ecosystem? That distribution is just gets so wide once you even get out of that Team Liquid umbrella.
Yeah, totally. I think it's super interesting. I actually look to traditional sports teams a lot in terms of how they're working with their athletes. I think for us, it's kind of an interesting puzzle, right? Because on the one hand, all of our athletes grew up online. They kind of get it. They already had their Twitter account set up before they joined. But at the same time, a lot of them don't think of themselves as influencers the way you might. Like, I think what I've seen with a lot of kind of pro athletes in the NBA and the MLB, whatnot, they know that they're celebrities by the time they get there. Whereas we'll sign a kid who's been playing solo queue, kind of just living by himself, playing solo games, and like maybe hasn't met his teammates in person, and like he will just get plucked out into this gigantic media organization. We're like, hey, there's a lot more that you can be doing here, and like there's suddenly the spotlight is on some of these kids, and that transition, I don't know, it's complicated, right? Because it's from 0 to 60 real fast.
Yeah, exactly. And for your top guys and gals, are you seeing them actually doing pretty well in terms of their individual sponsorships and monetizing their own feeds? Making those separate deals outside of Team Liquid, but just kind of one-on-one deals with brands as well?
Yeah, totally. And the streaming for them is always huge, right?
Yeah.
Like even off of the Twitters and the Instagrams, like the Twitch streams, there's just a lot of inventory, a lot of space there that they can tap into. And yeah, definitely content is really core to a lot of our athletes.
So I know you've been in the game for quite a while. So like, where do you think we're going? Like, what are you excited for in the future of this industry and where it's going?
Ooh, big question. Right now, honestly, I'm looking to get back out on stage.
I know.
And just some of those live events. But yeah, no, I think esports is here to stay. I think that much is probably pretty clear at this point. Yeah, I don't know, getting back to some of those live events, getting out there. I think esports is really cool in the sense that like it started global, right? Like I know a lot of the North American sports franchises are looking to branch out, but like we've started in Korea and China from day zero, right? So kind of getting back out there, exploring new regions too, right? Like for TL, one of our biggest areas is actually in Brazil. We have specific social accounts for Brazil. We have a YouTube channel, an entire content team down there. We have 2 rosters based out of Brazil, like just kind of going global and using the fact that we're not really tied to any location to be able to explore and kind of branch out.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question too. In terms of locations, obviously the American market has picked it up pretty large, but where do you see the other large countries that definitely have taken a liking to this sport?
Oh, I mean, I think, well, Korea is kind of the first answer. A lot of this is a contentious topic for the esports people listening, but a lot of esports started and kind of got the roots in Korea, right?
Yeah.
Where StarCraft was being televised over a decade ago, right? So it's obviously huge there. League of Legends in China is arrived in terms of being an S tier sport up there, right? Like, I know we like to think of some of the North American players as celebrities, but they don't even come close in terms of what some of the Chinese players are doing and the scale over there. The LPL, their League of Legends championship, has I think 18 teams, each with their own developed studio, and they do home and away games, and they're huge over there. So
that's awesome. Do you feel like I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel like one of the ways, obviously Ninja is one, but one of the ways in Fortnite, I think really broke through, I think, outside the esports market. You know, Drake is playing with Ninja, and like you see all these different NBA and NFL athletes. Did you really notice a huge uptick in followers and engagement, like once that kind of like pop culture moment happened and then more people just got latched on to the sport?
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously Fortnite was gigantic for all of the teams in this space, right? And yeah, it is kind of the first game to really punch through, right?
Yeah.
Like, it seemed from somebody who'd been in gaming for a long time that Fortnite was really one of those first times where it's like, oh, I can talk about being a gamer. This is okay, right? Like, kind of everybody started coming out of the woodwork. We were getting requests from all different sorts of people, like, hey, can one of your players play with our talent? Or like, can you do this? Can you do that? And we're like, oh, okay.
I think SNL had a skit about Fortnite. Like, that's when you knew it was like breaking through. Yeah. So
They definitely punched a really big hole and are still doing so.
Yeah, really. That's awesome. So yeah, to kind of put it in closing, I guess for any brand that's looking to enter the market, and actually before I go there, I did want to ask you about back during COVID. It was really interesting. Fox Sports got 1.1 million viewers on linear by doing an eNASCAR event that was essentially just people playing, and that was being broadcast on television. So that was so interesting. I just wonder what your thoughts are on. I know linear has tried to show these events, but it's such a different, I guess, watching experience when you can't comment, you can't, be kind of that two-way conversation. So do you think there's definitely room for linear to latch onto this, or is it just such a younger demo that it's going to be difficult to kind of break through?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the conversations that we've been having for a long time is like a lot of esports games don't really fit the TV model.
Yeah.
Right. Like
commercials.
Yeah. And so many of them are untimed, right? Like a League of Legends game could be over in 20 minutes or could drag on for 80, right? With no real stops or breaks. So I think some of that stuff is really hard. But honestly, like I think shoulder content, follow docs, a lot of those kind of
that's a really good
more
point.
Yeah, like everything outside of the game itself, I think totally has a spot there. We've done a couple shows and like work for Netflix, and people like I realize Netflix is not exactly the linear TV you were thinking about. But yeah, we've done segments
the shoulder programming, the behind the scenes, the documentary style. I mean, I think this audience just can't get enough of, I'm sure, outside of the actual live events, so.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of time that happens not on stage. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess as we move forward into 2022 and even get into the holiday season, I know you're super excited about live events, but I guess to kind of put a bow on all this, would love to get your thoughts on, give me one thing that you're super excited about, just the industry as a whole, then maybe one thing for Team Liquid that you're pumped about as we move forward this year.
Okay. I mean, League of Legends Worlds is coming up at the end of the year. They're still hosting it live. They hosted it live last year as well in China, and I think they were one of the first bubbles to successfully kind of execute a huge live event.
Yep.
They're going back. That's going to be kind of the pinnacle of competition for.
What's the grand prize for that?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. Okay. League is a bit different.
I know it's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, they do have a cash prize, but also a lot of it is crowdsourced through kind of like the skins and the in-game items and the digital sales that'll go into it as well. So it actually does change year over year, but Yeah, so that's happening. That's always going to be huge. It's kind of the crown jewel of the esports year. Um, and for Team Liquid, hoping to make it to Worlds. And yeah, I don't know. We've got some big CS events. We're now kind of, basically just getting back on land, getting back to the stage, and getting back to normal.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's nothing that can beat the live audience reaction to those games. So, well, Ryan, we really appreciate all the time, man, and all the good work you're doing over at Team Liquid, and keep all the good work up, man. I'm sure you're a busy man each and every day on all these different platforms and keeping up with all these different games. But we appreciate you dropping the knowledge.
Yeah, sweet. Thanks for inviting me on.
All right, Ryan, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
There you have it, Ryan Prager from Team Liquid. Thanks so much for joining us on the program. Hope you all got some knowledge out of that. I know Will, a huge reason we wanted to get him on the show, and I know we had the esports panel quite some time ago, but it's always awesome just to get thoughts. And I never really thought about this, but I think was it Roller Car Derby? Is that one what I'm thinking of that TNT had for quite some time? Seeing E NASCAR on Fox Sports perform pretty well. But I love what he said there towards the end. Like, really where the magic can happen on linear is that behind the scenes, that doc style, because you just can't really recreate the live streaming environment and having the player answer your comments in real time and all that. So I know linear and streaming is trying to figure out a way from an OTT standpoint to tap into such a huge market, but that may be a cool way to get it done.
Well, and they have such a huge advantage of they can go live, anytime. They could have an event start at midnight or, at halftime in the Super Bowl. I mean, there's so many options that you could, kind of get creative with that.
And I've found myself getting hooked on, just watching someone play and just, you hear them talking in the comments and you just get latched on like you're watching live sports. So,
and I'll tell you, there's a few professional sports teams who are very jealous of some of the esports turnouts that these competitions are getting.
And I think where League of Legends, I think, just blew the Super Bowl numbers out of the water a couple years ago. So, we're not talking about some niche market here that, a couple people like. Like, this is rivaling, the Major Four Sports League when it comes to, not only viewership, but revenue in some cases, not from a league level, but I mean, these cash prizes and the revenue that these teams and the overall, game makers are creating, just it's astronomical. So,
well, you just look at you go to the sponsors page with Team Liquid, or partners, I should say, and it's Honda and Jersey Mike's and some major players.
Yep. So hopefully that provided some value for all you fine listeners, and thanks so much for listening to the Business Social Podcast as you always do. It's absolutely free, Will. I don't know if you knew that, but no need for cash. We don't need a Venmo request. Just log in on a weekly basis and get some get your masterclass in social media.
Throw a 5-star review in there every now and then, would you?
Yeah, 5-star review on Apple iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on all the things. We can't thank Dave Ferk on this podcast. He wasn't. How'd you feel doing the podcast alone, Will?
I definitely missed him.
Yeah. We'll see him next show, maybe 73, the Dennis Rodman podcast. But we really appreciate Ryan Prager from Team Liquid joining us on the program. This has been yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast. My name is David Brickley. It's all been powered by STN Digital.